FTI community, I am joined by a member of a band that I discovered for the first time earlier this year, but has quickly found their way into my daily rotation. They are a phenomenal, and let me hit that to home, a phenomenal Canadian indie punk rock band who are celebrating a decade of being together. They have performed hundreds of shows across Ontario, and at the time of this recording, they have 9 shows lined up for October. Plus, that coincides with their long-awaited sophomore album, Unfurl, which releases on October 24th across streaming platforms, Bandcamp, and a physical vinyl, which we're going to talk all about. FTI community, please help me welcome Reid of BBQ Pope to the In Studio podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me today, man. I'm excited to talk to you.
This has been like a 3-month in the making over Instagram DMs. And it's so awesome that it's here.
I'm excited. Yeah. I kept, I'm the one that's often like trying to keep those balls in the air in the band. So I'm happy, we never let it hit the ground, and we finally have found ourselves here.
Likewise, I actually want to ask with that point, being like such like an integral part of the band, because it's a 3-piece, correct?
Yes, we are.
So sorry. You guys all have, of course, like unique roles in the band, but like the marketing perspective and making sure like the cities you travel to, the connections you build over time are very like tight knit and like close to your band. So it can also be like brand identity. Do you find with like, I guess, scheduling like a podcast with FTI or getting like a press release with like a collaborator, do you find that you found like a groove like approach in them, or do you like research them, I guess, before like messaging, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it is fairly organic. Like for cities that we go play, Sean, who's our guitar player, and myself, we kind of co-manage the project. Our drummer Duncan helps out as well, obviously, but Sean and I do a majority of that stuff. And yeah, I'd say it's really just the two of us, like kind of pooling our resources and our knowledge. And then when we don't know things, like reaching out to friends of ours who have traveled places and just being like, hey, like, where did you play? Or, who did you meet? Like, were there cool bands? And then I think also just living in Toronto, a lot of people obviously move here, like we all 3 of us grew up here, but, as we continue to grow and get older and stuff, I just keep meeting people from other parts of the country that, have moved to the city, and they're like, yeah, I'm from Sudbury, so I grew up playing shows there, and this is the good venue, and all my friends that still live there, these are their bands and stuff, or could be Hamilton or anywhere really. So yeah, I'd say it's a combination of just meeting people. And then honestly, the hack that I do a lot is I just look at posters. Like I'll go onto bands that I know have recently toured and be like, okay, this was the show they played in Halifax, and these were the bands that they played with, so I'm going to message these people to start,
Yes.
And then usually just asking them like who their friends are if they say no. And it's just kind of a long chain link fence of eventually, hopefully landing something, putting something together. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And our mutual connection here is one of my favorite bands of all time, Animal Boy. I have such a love for not only the music they create, but everybody inside that band. I think Animal Boy is my number one of bands I've seen live so many times. Mind you, when they play at Jimmy Jazz, that's just an excuse to also go to Jimmy Jazz. So when we built that connection earlier this year, I just saw Animal Boy at Planet Bean, and they were mentioning how they're trying to collaborate with you on an upcoming show because the one in August, I guess, didn't happen, if I'm correct.
Yeah, sadly, I think there was some people double booking themselves or something, but we do have a new date for that. I won't say when it's happening, but I will say that it's been scheduled and it will be getting announced very soon. I don't know the full lineup, but it'll be us, Animal Boy, in Guelph, and it'll finally be going down soon. I'm excited. I was bummed that fell through, so it'll be nice to be back. My girlfriend's sister and her husband live in Guelph, so I always like when we get to play there because I get to see them and hang out and stuff. So it'll be fun.
I think that I don't even have to say I think that. I know that I will be right at the beginning of that makeshift stage, right front line there, because Jimmy Jazz shows beginning at 10 and going until 1 in the morning gives me an excuse to make sure I'm energized. I'm just on my feet the entire time. But I really want to get into what we're talking about today, and that's everything about BBQ Pope. As previously mentioned, you guys are celebrating a decade of being a band. And the 10 years together, you've been a staple of the Ontario indie and punk rock music scene. And I'm confident not just Ontario, there's other pockets of the world where you probably just have just as big of an influence and a following with a plethora of singles, 2 EPs, a debut album, and the sophomore album on the way. You've really made an impact on your musician career, and I'm sure as individuals as well. But for those who don't know BBQ Pope, introduce us to the artists behind the instruments.
Yeah, so BBQ Pope is myself, my friend Sean, and my friend Duncan. We're a 3-piece. We call ourselves a garage psych punk band. That's always kind of been our little tag line for the project. I think that really just came out of, as teenagers, we were big fans of the kind of 4th or 5th wave of garage punk that was happening at the time, with like Fiddler and Waves and the OCs and all that stuff. And then just out of that, liking psych rock and punk. It was kind of just like all 3 things we liked, kind of trying to make a genre out of those 3 things. Since then, our music has kind of matured and grown a bit more to incorporate more elements of like post-hardcore and indie rock and shoegaze and just stuff we've gotten into as we've gotten older. It's a project that's very close to home. Obviously, like, we're friends first and foremost, so I'm really happy that it's always been the 3 of us, that none of us have ever left the project or anything. We've just kind of stuck by each other and taken some hiatuses here and there, but continue to write music and play music, and it's important to me. Yeah.
Take us to that moment in time where like the name came up, because it is such a unique band name that I'm sure you've been asked millions of times, but I am more so curious first and foremost.
Yeah, for sure. The sort of origin story of the band is Sean and myself. We both grew up in sort of Bloor West Village, High Park, which is kind of in the west end of Toronto. And so him and I have known each other since we were like 8 or 9 years old, and have been playing music together since grade 4. We were in a band for 6 years before BBQ Pope called The Hunch, from like grade 4 until grade 10. With another friend of ours. And then that kind of fell apart. And we had about a year where we weren't playing music together. And during that year, I got really into punk and hardcore. I was already into like pop punk and stuff, but I discovered like Discord and SST Records and all that kind of like classic 80s punk. I'm a record collector, and I've collected vinyl since I was a kid. So I bought at my local record store a Butthole Surfers EP. It was like a live record called Live at PCPP EP. And it's just live versions of their first album. And there's a song on it called BBQ Pope that is
okay.
The recorded version is not that sick, but the version on the live EP is bonkers. And I mean, I think that band would probably attest that they're a better live band than they are a recorded band. But me and Sean got together one afternoon, and we were like, hey, like, we haven't been playing music together. We should get another band going. It's always been a part of our friendship. And I was like, I have these lyrics that I've been writing. And so we just wrote like 6 songs in an afternoon. And then this show we knew was happening 3 days later. This kid that went to my high school had set up this like generator show in a schoolyard. And we were like, we should ask if we can play this. And he said that we could like basically start right when the poster said the show was starting for 20 minutes. So we were like, okay, we need a drummer and we need a name. So I was like, we're called BBQ Pope. And then we messaged Duncan and asked him to be the drummer. And then we played the show. And I think it was kind of a joke at first. Like all the songs were kind of stupid, and we didn't really like the kid that was throwing the show. So my goal was that we would like get it shut down because there was no permits, and it would be like the most punk thing ever. It would like ruin the night, but it'd be so sick. Everyone would love us for it. It was very teenage thinking. The show went on, by the way. We did not ruin it. But yeah, and then we just kind of kept practicing from there. I only sang at that show, so we didn't have bass in the mix yet, but I picked up the bass that summer because I was sort of in the spring of my grade 11 year, and then early in my grade 12 year we started playing more shows, and the band kind of developed from there.
Would you say at that moment in time, because like a lot of like dive bars and just overall like venues and like local cities are always like 19 plus after 9 p.m., that you were playing more like garage shows or even basement shows in houses? Or could you find your way to get into venues playing music at that age?
Yeah, I feel like we were pretty lucky. Like there was a few years when I was in high school where Toronto had like 4 DIY spaces that were running at the same time. There was the Bistro, which was like a vegan coffee shop on Bloor Street that used to throw punk shows. And there was also a spot called Faith Void, which was like a record store, and they would do shows in the back. There was Soy Bomb, which was like this skate house collective place that was in a loft, and they would throw shows there. Double Land in Kensington Market, which was like these people's apartment, but they converted it into a show space. All those spaces existed at the same time. So in some ways it was like before I knew about those spaces, it was definitely hard. Like our earliest shows were in my parents' basement. We would just like ask our friends' bands to play and move all the furniture, and bands would play down there. But I remember, eventually we learned how to book D Bistro, and we started playing shows there. They were always really cool to us. And like the 19 plus thing was a bit of a hex at first though. Like I remember the first bar that let us play was the Central, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was like in the sort of Honest Ed's neighborhood. There was like forgetting the name of the street, but when Honest Ed's was still around, there was a street next to it that had like a few art galleries, and like the Beguiling, the comic book shop, used to be there, and Suspect Video, which was like a video store for a long time, was there. So it was basically just this house that had been converted into a bar, and the owner was like, "You guys can come on a Friday and play at 5 until 9, and then we'll kick you out and make the bar 19 plus." So that was like an all ages hack that we figured out pretty early on too. And then I don't think it was really till my first year of university we started getting invited to play at places like the Silver Dollar Room or the Rivoli or places like that. And then it kind of became a bit more of a frustrating thing. Like the only time we played the Silver Dollar, we were allowed to come in, play our set, and then be escorted out. And we weren't allowed to stay for the rest of the show. And me and Sean are both a year older than Duncan. So we turned 19 shortly after that. And then for a year, Duncan was only allowed to come in, play the set, and then had to leave. And I do have some regrets. I do wish that back in the day I'd maybe left with him, but Sean and I would stay and talk to people and stuff. But yeah, so that was frustrating for a while. And I feel like that did rub off on me. And all ages shows are definitely something that are still important to me, even though I'm 27 now. I just think it's like, I remember what that felt like. And it was such a big part of the band that I'm still in, history and stuff. So I've never really forgotten, just what music was to me at that age. And I used to run a festival in Toronto actually, and our mandate was to be exclusively all ages. So we would go out of our way to book a whole weekend of all ages shows and stuff. So it's sad. There's not very many places that will do it in the city right now, but the Burdock Music Hall will do all ages shows, and trying to think if there's anywhere. I feel like that's kind of it. It's kind of sad. It's a little depressing right now, but yeah.
I have such like an appreciation for you guys sticking together from like what you wanted to become like kind of like a joke performance in high school to shut something down, and just right out of the gate, you three were already like I can't think of the exact term I'm trying to say, but you guys are like just going through the wire, I guess, of just going through all these hardships at such a young age, because like kids like between the ages of 14 and 18, they're still like figuring things out. So everything's like so experimental, but it takes a certain individual, in this case 3, to really push through, persevere, because you guys all have a common interest. and you want to see who will put you on stage, who will book you, but also just like how much that you're willing to do to let people know, like, hey, we're BBQ Pope. At the time, we're 17 and 18, but I'm telling you right now, the moment we're all 19, we're playing all around Toronto and Ontario. Have you ever had a moment to where it could have honestly happened in the last few years where there was like those bands, like a 16, 17, 18-year old, where you saw yourself in their shoes and you're like, I'm going to make sure you guys have a similar experience that I had at that age?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah, funnily enough, a family friend of mine, this guy Tom that I know, I used to babysit him and his sisters, and he's like 18 now and is in a band and stuff. So I feel like through him and talking to him, like I definitely can see some of the ideals that I had at his age, just emerging from things that he says and stuff. And yeah, I feel like I try not to like really concern myself too much. I feel like the kids are all right. Like they'll just do what they're doing and run things and stuff. But I try to help out in subtle ways, just like I remember talking to him about just like frustrations he was having, like, kids like coming to shows and like getting hammered and like, shutting things down and ruining it for the kids that it really matters to. And I remember just trying to tell him that like when you're 17, like music is kind of almost like sports for the kids that are bad at sports. Like,
Yeah.
and like the kids that like it's really important to are like still going to be doing it in 10 years. And like the kids where it's kind of just like, a thing to glob onto, like they won't be around for very much longer. And stuff. So yeah, that was a conversation that I found interesting because I remember feeling like it was like the most important thing in the world at that age and stuff. So yeah, it's like I said, yeah, I don't try to go out of my way to do, be too involved or anything. But if it's organic, then I'm all there and stuff. Yeah.
I think it's just so important at like any age, especially like to always like showing the encouragement and the appreciation to others that are doing exactly what you're doing. Cause like you can fake having the passion and nobody will give you the time of day. But if someone's specifically like, hey, I need all the advice, I need all like the doors open for me, I have having that figure such as you guys to kind of go like, this is what we did, this is how I found it was so important. And that kind of translates sort of into the sound you guys produce because it's very like, as you mentioned, it matured over time. And just like being a band in high school, very experimental sounds over time to really find like the BBQ Pope signature sound. You guys describe yourself as a mixture of power pop, psychedelia, indie punk rock, and from your first EP, Squid Vicious, to your first album, all the singles over time, I really do feel like you guys have found your signature sound that's resonated with listeners and grew you three as musicians. Comparing your early discography to what it is today, would you say that there's always been like a consistency to your sound? Or did you guys like find something like maybe 4 or 5 years in that you ran with?
I do think there's always been definitely consistent elements, something that we've kind of been talking about a lot just in the last couple of years as we were making this new record was just, the sort of fact that we are a 3-piece, like we've never made the decision to add a second guitar player or for me to, drop the bass and just be the singer and get someone else to play bass. Like, we all sort of play our instruments together in a very specific way. Like Duncan, for example, is like, he started playing drums just because of that message we sent him. Like he was not a drummer in our scene. Like he was a guitar player and a bassist. So he's like self-taught, like, and stuff. So he plays the drums in like a very specific way, and bass for me too. Like I'm pretty much self-taught. Like I was taking guitar lessons, but we just needed a bass player. So I started playing bass for this project. And so, the way him and me play as a rhythm section is like, we played a couple shows where we had to have someone fill in for Duncan because he'd injured his hand. And I remember like playing with that drummer who's like very technical and like, very proficient. And I was like, oh, there's like a kind of lack of looseness that me and Duncan like kind of usually have together where things just kind of like are like tight, but like still like kind of loose in just the way that we play together. So, yeah, I'd say like just our approach to the instruments has always been the same. And we kind of, through that, because there's only three of us, like I remember listening to Jawbreaker talk about, because they were a three-piece too, talk about like how they would write, and they were like, this isn't the case for us, but they were joking that none of them trusted each other to like be doing enough things because there was only the three of them. So like each of them have so much going on. We're a little bit more minimalist than they were, but we kind of treat each instrument like a lead instrument in its own way. I feel like I'm bass, but also rhythm guitar kind of. And Sean is playing with space despite being the lead guitar player. He's going from rhythm to leads constantly and stuff. So yeah, just kind of, and then Duncan is always kind of doing weird fills that are hooky in an interesting way. So yeah, I'd say that's been a through line across the board. And also just the pop structure, we like a good verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro structure. It's not rocket science, but yeah.
I really can imagine you guys playing all these shows together. You have such like a formula in your head that you're not following, but you're just expecting. So having somebody fill in on the drums, you're like, oh, that's different because it's not as loose as if it was like the original three members. Do you find when you bring somebody in, maybe that's the only time it ever happened, where you brought them in, you learned something from them joining the band for a small period of time?
That was the only example.
Got you.
Yeah, our buddy Max, who we've known forever, he used to be the drummer in a band called Goodbye Honolulu that we were all good friends with, and now he plays around in a bunch of different projects. Yeah, I mean, I think just I mostly just learned that it was fun to play with Max. I don't know. I didn't really learn too much specifically, I guess, but I've always really admired Max, and he's just such a beast of a drummer. Like we just sent him the stems for the songs, and me and Sean showed up to run them with him, and he just already knew them. So it was, I was like, okay, like I think for myself, just as a musician, like, it was just like, okay, like you have to like do your homework and, and stuff. That was, Max definitely taught me that, I think in that moment, that like you can do anything, you have to be prepared. Yeah.
Be prepared and definitely like be like appreciative of like this opportunity, because having like a Max in your back pocket to make sure everything like just follows through and is as smooth, so there's no like hiccup, I guess, in the live performance. Let's talk about what's on the horizon, and it's the sophomore album Unfurl, which releases on Friday, October 24th, just under a month away from the time of recording. Currently, there's 3 singles out. We have pop punk song from 1994, Content, and Face the Future, which gives the listeners a small glimpse into what they can expect in this long-awaited project to the 2017 self-titled album. Talk about Unfurl in detail, like kind of like from its conception to the present day, especially with it being less than a month away.
Yeah. The record came about sort of in the wake of a hiatus that the band took. We took about 2 years off from the project. At the time that the hiatus started, Sean and Duncan were still playing in a band called Fadeaways that was dealing with just a bit more of a trajectory that BBQ Pope was having at the time. Like they had some management and were getting some support tour offers and stuff. So that was taking up a lot more of their focus. And then COVID happened, so we were kind of just like, maybe let's just take a little bit of a break from BBQ Pope, focus on some other things, and we'll find our way back to it eventually. And our friend Deanna Petkoff threw this birthday party a few years ago, and basically what she did was she booked a venue and she headlined it with her band, but she booked this kind of surprise special guest lineup. And she asked if we would consider being like one of the bands, just as like a fun one. And we were like, okay, sure, let's do it. So we got together and we played all of our old songs, and we still knew them all, which was a nice feeling, just like, hadn't forgotten them and stuff. And we played the show, and it felt nice. My girlfriend that I'm with, like I'd been dating her for a year at the time, and she'd never gotten to see us play. So that felt special. And it just seemed like a lot of our friends had really missed it, you know, like a lot of people seemed like excited that we're doing this and stuff. So, I had kind of told myself that during the hiatus, I wouldn't be the one to kind of like initiate bringing the project back. Just because I had, you know, not been the guy that was also in fadeaways and stuff. So I was like, you know, if Sean and Duncan want to do it, then like I'm down, but I'll kind of wait for their cue. And surprisingly, it was Sean who was like, you know what, that was really, really fun. And, you know, we should do that again, but sort of more
Let's go.
based, you know. So he booked us a show at the Baby G. They were doing their like Sunday night series where it was like free to attend, and we were able to, you know, curate the lineup and stuff. So we played that, and we were like, you know what, for this show, like let's write a new song. You know, let's not just play the hits or whatever. So this feels just like a nostalgic cash grab or something. Like not that we were making that much money, but you know,
but
like
still, yeah,
you know. So we wrote Content. That was the song that we wrote during that rehearsal period. And we already had Pop Punk Song from 1994. That funnily was, we debuted it at the last ever show we played before the pandemic. We played at Long Winter in Toronto. And then like 2 weeks later, COVID started. So we had that song, and we had another song on the record called Old Friends that we've just been playing forever. But the other 7 songs on the record we had not written. So we started with Content. And that just felt nice, you know. It kind of came about organically. We all felt very, very refreshed by the song, and I feel like that song kind of set the tone for the rest of the record. Like that, and what we were playing with on Pop Punk Song, kind of the like grungier, kind of bit of Britpop, bit of shoegaze influence that we were bringing into those 2 songs, and yeah, what we would do between sort of February and June of 2023 when we recorded the record is we would just get together at Sean's house in our practice space, and a lot of the time it was me coming in with like maybe a loose riff or some lyrics that I was sitting on, and then we would just start sort of structuring songs. You know, Duncan was really great during that period of time. He was like, you know, this song kind of sounds like something we've done a million times before. So, you know, it was interesting to watch him as a drummer, like really consciously try to do things he'd never done before. And Sean as a guitar player, I feel like really, really stripped himself back on this record. Like, you know, focused on like space within the songs for the guitar in an interesting way. And I feel like I just improved a lot as a lyricist and as a vocalist, and the bass kind of holds the songs together in a cool way. Like a lot of my favorite bands are quite bass driven, like Joy Division and stuff like that. So that felt cool to bring into the mix. And then we went into the studio in August of that year with our friend Dylan Franklin, who's a great producer. He works with tons of bands in the city, and he plays in a band called Tallies and another band called Headcrack, which are both great. And yeah, we recorded it live off the floor with him at Witchwood Sound here in the city, and then did a few more guitar days and then 3 vocal days at Sean's house. We just set up like a mic in a closet, and I just yelled into it for like 72 hours. Yeah, and then it was done. But we've been sitting on the record for like a year now, which feels kind of surreal. It's been a long process of, you know, then getting it mixed, and then Dylan mixed it, and then our this guy Will Killingsworth, who has a studio called Dead Air, he mastered it for us. And yeah, and then just kind of trying to like outdo ourselves on PR and rollout. You know, we in the past, I mean, music has changed so much, having been a band for 10 years. Like when we made our demo Squid Vicious, like we just put it on Bandcamp, and we like made and would sell them at shows. But even with our first record, I feel like that's all we did. We got CDs made and you know, put it on Bandcamp. So it's been interesting to kind of learn about, you know, like putting a single out. I've never done that for anything. I've been part of like dropping a single before the full record, and like emailing blogs and, you know, just kind of, you know, trying to do our best to get the word out. So that's kind of gotten us to this moment here. And yeah, we've got one more single coming out with the record. We've got a music video coming out for it. and we're getting vinyl pressed, which we've never done before, which I'm very excited about. Just independently putting that out ourselves.
Lately I've been feeling like a pop punk song from 1994, 'cause all I wanna do is drink and wallow on my bedroom floor. Wait to feel my phone buzz so I can see if it's your name. I know it never is, so I face the future. Tiny little plane hanging out of reach in someone else's hands. Down solo, we fight the urge to overload. Each day filled, our moments spilled, never enough to have our fill. Prove our worth in an unjust system in our
I think that like your excitement and how many like things you were connecting. Also, great drink of choice. That's my favorite drink to go to. I absolutely love a Guinness.
Came at the time, like I quit drinking a year ago.
Okay,
Like Zero came like at the time that I needed it. Like I'm so happy to hit the market at the same time that I quit drinking.
That could be a whole other podcast for me. That sounds terrible, but I fully agree with that. I really love just your passion and just like your awareness to connect so many like moments in time with your friends, not even in BBQ Pope, but just like the people you're calling out that have been such like a crucial part of how you guys got to where you are today. And I think what's really neat, the connection I made was when you said I wouldn't be the guy to be like the one to say like, we should start doing this again, guys. It was Sean, I believe you said, that said, hey guys, we should do this again. It was really fun. And you were so self-aware that it's just like, yeah, but if we do this, it can't be like the nostalgia hits just to say like, hey guys, remember these from the late 2010s? You really pushed yourself to not only, like, as you mentioned, strip back on the guitar, learn a lot more about the drums and kind of like be a better lyricist. Did you find during this album creation that you guys had that idea of where you wanted to go and you were just like shocked by the outcome of how far you guys came, or I guess what you learned?
Yeah, no, I remember feeling like really, really excited during the writing process because in the past, like music that we'd been recording, it had been a lot more like stage to page in sort of the creation process. Like we would have songs and debut them live and just have them as live songs for a really long time. And sort of through the performance process, like they would refine themselves, like little things would emerge, like, oh, we threw a hit in there, or like a little hook happened that, was accidental. And we would just kind of remember those things. And over time, the songs would develop and stuff. But this was the first time where we just wrote the record and we didn't incorporate the songs into the set list, except for a few of them. So it was like, yeah, my first time just like writing a record and then just recording it, and now we have to play it live and stuff. So, I feel like that it was my first time really being part of like a writing process and like, also just like not really overthinking it, just being like, I remember like we would finish practices and be like, okay, cool. Like that felt, this song is not done yet, but like it's cool that we like came up with that part or whatever. And by when we went into the studio, some of the songs were like not even entirely done. So we kind of, were able to play with, like our producer Dylan for a couple tracks would be like, I'm just going to hit record. Like, let's just see what happens, like there's one song that's definitely a little bit psychier than the other ones. And, we must've recorded it like 10 times and each time it was like, not the same thing. So the version that we landed with, it was cool to kind of be a little bit more like instinctual and a little bit more playful with this record, so yeah.
Converting that over to the 9 live shows that you have for like the album rollout, you guys are touring far, and it's really cool that it all comes to the November 7th show at the Monarch Tavern. talk about this upcoming tour, like especially some of the places you're traveling to. Is there any like significance with some of the venues you chose, or did you just choose the cities?
Yeah, no, it was more the cities, the venues. Some of them I'd say there's some minor significance, like the Rainbow in Ottawa is just a venue that we've always wanted to play at. And we were finally able to book it this time. We've been unsuccessful in landing a show there in the past. And then with Montreal, I don't think we've ever played Turbo House. Montreal is probably the city we've played out to the most, maybe besides Hamilton. And I feel like we've played every venue there except for Turbo House. So
got you.
That'll feel nice. So there's a few in the significant sense of just like checking it off the list. Just like, okay, cool. Like we can say we've played there. But I'd say the significance for me is more just like the fact that we're doing the East Coast run. It's something that I've never done before. Sean and Duncan did it once before with Fadeaways. But yeah, it's just something that I've always thought would be really fun to do. We've never played Halifax. We've never played Charlottetown. And I feel like, both those cities have really blossomed musically in the last couple of years. Like, bands like Absolute Losers from Charlottetown are killing it. And Customer Service from Halifax is a very cool band. I'm just excited to go like see what the heck's going on. Admittedly, what I'm most excited about is New Brunswick, because that is a province that is, I feel like, often forgotten. Like people like kind of forget about New Brunswick. It's also just a province that's a little bit harder to book shows in for some reason. Like there's lesser venues, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that it's hard to get a response from them sometimes. But we ended up befriending this person who has a band called Babyland based in Moncton. Okay. And she was really, really awesome in just being like, oh, you want to play this town? Here are all my friends in this town. You want to go to this place? Here are all the people to message. So we've, to my excitement, managed to book 4 shows in New Brunswick.
Let's go.
I thought we would maybe book like 1 or 2, but we're playing there the most on this tour. So I'm kind of, I don't know. There's something I feel like when I was younger, like being like a city kid, like I had less interest in playing like smaller towns, but now I kind of like it more. Like there's just like too much fucking going on in Montreal and Toronto, and it feels like, because of that, there's like a lack of cohesion sometimes. It's just like there's like 17,000 scenes coexisting, and it's almost kind of just like a loose thread. But I feel like in smaller towns, like the people that really care, like really fucking care. And even if there's only 10 of them, even if there's only like 5 of them, like they really, really fucking care. So I'm just excited to go out and like meet those types of people and see what the heck is happening.
FTI family, I'm here right quick to tell you about my newest video. I made a video on the newly released Silent Hill F, giving my thoughts on the game as well as addressing some of the discourse I've seen about the game online. Are you curious about the themes in the game or want to hear what everyone's been saying? Then I encourage you to check out the video after this podcast and maybe subscribe if you want more quality video game essays. Thanks as always to FTI for showcasing my work. Back to you.
So you and I shared the same sentiment on that. Like I can't stress enough, and just a quick side note, and I promise I won't take up too much of the time with this. This past Thursday, we just had our Creators Connect event here at Brothers in Guelph, and essentially it was a night where like we had some like artists from all kind of realms. They were speaking. Like we had Tyler Warden, he creates watches. And then we had Stefano, who's our go-to photographer, hometown shooter, who I'm sure you will see at that upcoming show in Guelph. And then we also had this trio, and maybe you know of them. They're called Bad Club Media, and they run this thing called Bands You Should Know. And the excitement that I watched the FTI community members who live in Guelph come in and go like, I didn't know that there was people from Allura, Bad Club Media, who are so passionate about music, because they really fucking care, as you said. Like when you meet that group of people that really care, I feel like that does so much more for your own path forward than being on like a Spotify, one of the best playlists you can be on Spotify, because you're watching the excitement from somebody's face just be sucked into you, and you're like, I'm now going to make music for people specifically like you that care that I make music. your whole tour ends at the Monarch Tavern, which is a hometown like finale, right? Does that have any significance?
It does, yeah. No, for sure. It's you know, the Monarch, I think, is probably my favorite venue in Toronto. I feel like in my 20s, I've had like, probably my most favorite show going experiences there. It's just, I don't know. There's just something about it that feels different than some of the other venues. Like it's on a residential street in Little Italy. So it's just kind of tucked away and like very quaint and very cute. So it's just got like a particular vibe to it. But yeah, we haven't had a release show really since the EP we put out after our first full length called Winters of My Youth. We threw like a tape release show for that at Faith Void, and so we just haven't really had like a night like that since. So I'm just kind of curious to see what will happen. It's it'll be like our first time kind of headlining a show in a long time. And Flamingos Pink from Montreal, who's the band that we're doing this whole East Coast tour with, they're going to come to Toronto and play the show with us. And then our friend Amelia Maxwell is going to play with her band. So yeah, like I think there's significance in that too, because Amelia is someone that I've met more recently. Funnily enough, I went to high school with her partner and stuff. So I've known her girlfriend for a really long time, but I've only known Amelia for about a year now. But I've known the guys in Flamingos Pink since I was like 18, like BBQ Pope.
Let's go.
The first time we went to Montreal, we played with Sasha, who's the singer's first band, the Corks. That was our first ever out of town show, and it was with their band, and we've just been buddies ever since. So there's a nice like kind of throwback, old friendships and then like new friendships. So that feels like the kind of old chapter of the band, like the initial 6 years, and then like the new chapter with someone like Amelia in the mix. It's like a nice best of both worlds kind of situation. And also Dan Burke is putting the show on. And I think that's the first time Dan Burke's ever put on a show that we asked him to put on. So
Let's go.
He's just such like a Toronto legend and like character, so that's a cool feeling too.
I think that when you're looking at it from that perspective, where it's like the first 6 years and now the most recent 4, it's kind of probably, and maybe I'm entirely wrong, it's probably going to paint a really big picture for the future after this album's out, and like where you can kind of like explore to, because with 9 shows, you're going to meet so many people that are like, hey, you should come out next summer when we do our tour and like open for us, or hey, I have this band that's in New Brunswick that you definitely need to hear. So it's going to kind of be like a moment in time that you'll want to capture in a bottle to go like, we did that, everything we've done has led up to this, but now let's look forward to the future. And something that I think I've really appreciated since discovering you guys is how much you make like people care about your guys' music and who you are. Because during the research for this interview, something that caught my eye right away was the line that was like, BBQ Pope is what you'd get if Nirvana and the Pixies had a baby. Because it's such a captivating comparison to critically acclaimed icons, but it's also such a strong musical hook to let somebody who maybe has never heard of you go like, that's my type of music, I'm in. And I'm sure playing hundreds of shows Ontario-wide, you played alongside so many great musicians and performers, but they probably, or if I'm wrong, they maybe did not have like that like significant hook to bring like a stranger and convert them into a listener. Do you guys believe that having a strong presentation of both BBQ Pope, the marketing side and the music side, need to be 50-50? Or do you kind of make sure the music always like reigns supreme?
Yeah, I think we try to let the music sort of like dominate the marketing stuff. Like, I feel like a majority of our marketing is kind of geared towards like capturing our live show and, just the music videos that we make and, just kind of like inserting our personalities and stuff. Like, I feel like it's really easy to overthink that stuff and, like do like stuff that's, kind of just like trendy or, aping like content other people make. And, we do that sometimes too, we're only human. But I'd say like what I feel in my heart is, is just that the live show is the best space, to meet a person, and show them who you are. And something that we try to do with our live show is we go out and we play and we don't stop playing for like 30 minutes. Like we just have we try to have really tight transitions. And, if we have to do stage banter, just keep it like short and punchy. And also just try to like put on a show. I think it's easy to just get up there and, do nothing or be timid or whatever. So I feel like you kind of have to like bring a person in, like, for them to give a shit, you have to like really bring them in and stuff. Or I know it's inappropriate, but like when we were kids, we would be like, you gotta like go out and like fuck the audience, or you could get up and jerk off, or you could get up and just like fuck, and it's like, obviously I don't really feel that in my anymore. I was 16 when I was saying that, but it's I feel like there's some you could take that metaphor and find a better metaphor, and there would be some truth to that,
In the world of professional wrestling, something that I've really incorporated from that world into my world with FTI is when you're watching someone perform, or like me, for example, like as like the host of the reoccurring creator of the week, I try to just take my personality and ramp it up to 200, because the whole point of like creator of the week is to make sure like odds are you've never heard of the person that we're celebrating as creator of the week, because FTI has so many amazing and incredible people in it that I want people to know, like, you need to know who BBQ Pope is. You need to know who Alina Mona is. But if I present it like, hey guys, by the way, I've listened to BBQ Pope, you'd love this. But if I'm like, you need to hear the album when it comes out on October 24th, just making the audience give a shit because you're showing that you give a shit goes such a longer way. And I really appreciate you said that about the performance, like the aspect where you just want to play for 30 minutes straight. Because for the longest time, I was on the flip side of that coin. I saw Rainbow Kitten Surprise at Budweiser Gardens or Budweiser Stage at the old Ontario place. And I was so not upset, but I was so like, because there was no stage banter. It was just 45 minutes of them playing. And I'm like, the tickets weren't that cheap. Like the commute there was not that cheap. And I just feel like they just played and didn't really like give a shit. But as I went to more shows in Guelph and I kind of dissected like the Animal Boys and Excuse Me and like all my musician friends, I really understood that like they're here to hear me. They're here at this concert to hear my music I have to play. The time for conversation and those connections is after the show when they come up and tell me like, thank you for the performance. So now that I'm looking at it from that perspective, I'm just like, that makes sense. Not saying that Rainbow Kitten Surprise was going to be in the crowd after, but for the longest time, I was just like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, I want to hear them say Toronto.
No, for sure. I think there is a version of what I'm describing that we do where you are just kind of phoning it in a little bit. If you're like at more of a mid-sized level and stuff, it's easy to, I sometimes I resonate with what you're saying. I feel like there's like a middle ground where you want a little bit of personality and as much rock and roll as possible. But yeah.
I will always like just remember that like eureka moment of like, that's why they do it. Now I'm gonna take a step back and listen. And speaking of the Guelph music scene, I am so fortunate to be a part of this music scene in Guelph because everybody is so connected and everybody like lifts each other up. And like my favorite thing to do at any concert is watching the different bands be front line for the band that's currently performing. And I think that's just one of the coolest feelings because you have your green room where the bands can hide until it's their curtain call and they can come out. But when the band is just like, yo, like, hell yeah, like, you guys killed it. We're up next. I hope you guys give us the same support. That goes so far. And that goes past like just live performances. whether it's like sharing something somebody has coming out, whether it's representing their merchandise on the day to day. Would you share that same sentiment with the artists and bands you've met over the last 10 years? Like, has there been anyone specific where you're like, you've really connected to me, I guess?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, like it was kind of funny when we started, when we were in our sort of senior years of high school, for whatever reason, a lot of people we were friends with were starting bands at the same time. So there was just kind of this like little micro scene that we were part of, where it was like us, our friend Owen Wolf, who's in a band called the Slow Dregs right now. He had a band called the A-Listers at the time. My friends Dan, Luke, and Callum had a band called Citrus that we used to play shows with. There's this band called Hex that went to our high school. We would play shows with them. And yeah, so I think that kind of like environment, you know, kind of rubbed off on us from the get-go. And then when we were more like 17, 18, we met that band Goodbye Honolulu that I was talking about. And I would say meeting them, and then Deanna Petkoff, who I mentioned earlier as well, she used to be in a band called Pins and Needles. And I would say meeting the members of Pins and Needles and the members of Goodbye Honolulu really set the tone for us, because they were just like a little bit older than us. Like they would have been in grade 12 when we were in grade 9. So they were just like a little bit more resourceful, a little bit more established, and the kind of helping hand that they extended to us as kind of younger, kind of super green kids, you know, rubbed off on us. And they would come to our shows and stuff and be upfront. And Emmett from Goodbye Honolulu is in our first music video for I Want a Soda. He's like the guy that has the soda stand. If anybody watches that video, and we roll up and like steal all the soda from him. So like little things like that, you know, just like messaging him and being like, hey man, like, would you do this for us? And him just being like, sure, whatever, I'll fucking do it. Emmett last night had a release show, and it was, you know, it was like sold out at Expo here for his new band Web. So it's like, you know, these are all people that are still making music and still doing cool shit. And, you know, we're not all necessarily like super close in each other's orbits like we were like 6 or 7 years ago. But, you know, we're still all doing stuff and still all our friends. And it's nice, you know? So yeah, I think that moment in time has always stuck with me as what it's all about, you know?
And especially keeping tabs on each other as like not even like a support system, but kind of like watching your friends and your fellow musicians get silent wins kind of silently pushed you to kind of do more, because you're like, hey, like they just landed this deal. Hey, they just landed like the ravioli. And they're really like, I want to do that as well. And then you get silently inspired and you can just run with it. My next question for you kind of puts a bow on the conversation, and it's our staple question of the In Your Studio podcast. It centers around the topic of vulnerability. And I know, probably being a band for a decade, well, I don't know, of course, but I'm sure it's come with the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, and so many opportunities in between that have really grown all three of you as individuals. But you always brought like the vulnerability factor to push each other forward. How has vulnerability played a factor in both your personal life and then who you are in BBQ Pope?
That's an interesting question. I think that vulnerability is definitely, you know, a big part of the songwriting process for us. Like, I write a majority of the lyrics. Like Sean has penned a couple songs, but on this new record, for example, I wrote all the lyrics. And yeah, I'd say I've written lyrics for other bands that I've been in and stuff, but I feel like the thing that's kind of the through line for what makes a song a BBQ Pope song is that it's sort of addressing sort of like the raw, uglier, you know, parts of life. And, you know, whether that's, you know, through a lens of humor or in a direct way. But yeah, I've always tried to kind of explore like, you know, those more real topics. And you know, on our first record, you know, the song Cry, you know, is about like going to my my grandmother's funeral. I never met my grandmother. She was like estranged from my mom. So that song's about, going to that experience, having that experience and meeting all these relatives I'd never met and stuff. And then on this new record, there's a lot that's just kind of happened in the last few years, being in our 20s, just being that much older, just like a lot more like real experiences, not that the songs we wrote before weren't about real things, but just kind of more things that teenagers or, young adults would be navigating. But I feel like this is a much more adult record. There's a lot of themes of grief, a lot of themes of just, navigating, career stress, also just like living just in during these times, just while there's like war and genocide and, just fucked up shit happening and, just kind of living in like the facade of the West, just the sort of like fake shield of safety of North America and stuff. So yeah, I feel like I've always tried to be vulnerable and candid through the project. And then in my own life, I don't know. I feel like I've always just tried to be like genuine and empathetic, I guess. And I mean, yeah, a lot of my friends that I'm friends with are just, people I've known for a really long time. So I feel like, to maintain those friendships, you've got to kind of be vulnerable and like,
yes,
grow through things together. And, there's going to be certain growing pains and, and things. So yeah, I'd say that that's more on the personal front, but as an artist, I'd say, and I'm also a playwright. I feel like in my playwriting, try to tackle, vulnerable subjects too. So yeah, I'd say it's a very important thing to me as an artist. I think it's, yeah, if that answers your question.
That was a fucking beautiful answer. Like I think what's really neat about the musician life is when like vulnerability plays such a factor in like your songwriting, like how a song's created, how a band is formed, and how they just become like more glued together over time. It's also funny because when you release something, it's no longer up to you guys to figure out how somebody will perceive it. So if there's a song that's like a very dark song and like it hits on like themes of like death or maybe like, of course, like a breakup or maybe just like something that was very like shocking in someone's day to day. But then you can have a listener not even pick up on those at all. And you can't be mad at the listener. You've just also opened up their brains and their ears to perceive it how they want. When you guys release music or you write music, is your intention to only try to give one perspective or do you welcome in all perspectives?
I feel like it's something I don't really consciously think about too much. Like that song Cry that I mentioned, it's funny. Like there's a few blog posts out there that I feel like, people that have been studying music journalism have written for like, college radio stations that I've stumbled upon. And it's like them like summarizing the song, what they think it's about. And as the writer, I'm like, that's not what this song is about.
Not even close.
Like, okay, cool. Like, if that's what you interpreted, then like, I can't do anything about that. I feel like with this, I feel like that's something I used to really what am I talking? I used to actually really be anxious about this when I was younger. Like I was really kind of nervous about people misinterpreting me,
yes.
Or like taking me the wrong way. I feel like with this new record, in a sense, I feel like I was dealing with things that are a lot more sort of abstract and like I don't have the answers for. And I feel like part of the being more of an adult record is that like I feel like I'm not really seeking answers as much as more just like working through questions I don't have the answer for. Like through the lens of grief and stuff. So yeah, I feel like that creates like a bit more of an openness for people to hear the record and if it, a bit more open interpretation at times.
And especially like being able to now like can like now when I go to listen to your as a discography after this, I've already like formed like some like initial thoughts to a few songs that I've honestly heard for the first time in the last month, but now I'm gonna listen to it and go like, wow, I actually just heard this a way different 2 hours ago than I am now. And then with the album coming out, I'm gonna be so excited because now I'm gonna dissect it. Now I'm gonna go like, okay, this might be about this, but if it's not, hell yeah, that's what I'm pulling from it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because content, the single, like that word, when you read it, content and content are spelled the exact same way, just, phonetic. So people have come out to me like, really like that song Content, man. And I'm just like, I can't do anything about this. It's just out in the, people are going to read it in their head how they read it. So, yeah, I feel like I'm a little, I was very uptight when I was younger, admittedly. So I feel like I've relaxed a lot. But yeah,
I'm in that bubble of not anymore, of course, not anymore, but the content and content. I was definitely in that group of people. The final 3 questions here, I sarcastically dub some of the most thought-provoking questions because I'll ask you the question, you'll think of 10, but I'm narrowing you down to 1 or 2, not limited to one medium. Choose as many as you would like in terms of the medium. Put the FTI community onto some new things to check out. Maybe like music you've listened to, a film you've recently watched, a book that you've recently read.
Sure. Yeah. On Wednesday, I went and saw the new Dennis Cooper film with my girlfriend at the Paradise Theater. Dennis Cooper is a writer people should check out if they haven't. He's a very cool guy who kind of came out of punk rock in the 80s, and he used to have a zine called Little Caesar magazine, and they would publish like poetry and fiction and stuff. But he wrote this series of books in the late 80s and 90s called the George Miles Cycle. And basically the book is him working through the experience of a relationship he had when he was a young man with another man. And that man tragically passed away. So it's him kind of like working through that loss through this writing project. And I learned about him through a podcast. I think it was the Apology podcast, which is like the former fiction editor of Vice, like the podcast that he hosts. And, I'd never heard of Dennis Cooper, and he was like, yeah, you could sort of compare him to David Lynch in the sense that people say things are Lynchian, like things are Coopernian, in his writing. And having read a few of his books now, I definitely can resonate with that. So anyways, he's making movies now with this guy, Zach Farley, who I think is from France. But it was a cool event. They were both there. They did a talk back, and the movie was fucking bizarre. So, we're like into bizarre movies. I recommend, I don't know if it'll have much of a theatrical release, but I'm sure it's going to be screened or available somehow. It's about this family that are participating in like the home haunt trend. I guess in Los Angeles, it's very popular to convert your house into a haunted house. And it's about this family that is trying to make the scariest home haunt. And this young man who's the protagonist of the film kind of stumbles upon their house while they're, setting it up, and ends up working for them. Anyways, very, very, then it just gets really weird. I won't give anything else away. But yeah, so Dennis Cooper, his movie Room Temperature, I guess it's a movie and a book. And then music, another podcast I listen to a lot is the Turned Out a Punk podcast that Damien from Fucked Up hosts. And him and Nick Woj from Cold World, they now do this bi-weekly podcast called I Heard They Stream Live, where they like talk about episodes of the podcast that Damien's done with guests. And they were talking about this band called Burial Ground from Wilkes-Barre, which, I don't know, just like really sick, like metalcore. Like I'm not like a big metal guy, but I really like hardcore. And they were talking about this band, like, as I guess like Nick is from Wilkes-Barre. So he was like, this was like the band. If you were from Wilkes-Barre, like they like united the scene. Like, I think he was like, yeah, like emo kids, like hardcore kids. Like we would set aside our grievances for this band's set. And it's fucking sick. Like check it out. Like just like riffs you can fucking swim in, and Trying to think of other band. I'll give you like one more band. What else? I literally just had a drink with my brother and we were just talking about stuff we've been listening to. The Flex. I've been listening to The Flex a lot this weekend, who are like a UK hardcore band, who apparently in the UK were kind of like Burial Ground. Like the UK hardcore scene was like kind of shitty for a few years. And then they came around and just like united it and made it sick again.
Hell yes.
But yeah, when me and my girlfriend went to London a few years ago, we went to All Ages Records, which is like a really famous record store in London. And I picked up their record Chewing Gum for the Ears. And yeah, if you're into kind of like oi, like Discharge, like kind of like British offshoots of punk and hardcore, but then also American hardcore, it's like a interesting like blend of sounds that they're employing. So yeah, those are two bands that people can check out if they want to.
I will. I'll be in your DMs after this session to get more on that film because that sounds fucking cool.
Yeah,
this room temperature, that sounds cool.
Yeah. Sorry for the tangent about Dennis Cooper, but yeah, people should read his
no, that was awesome.
He wrote this book, the Sluts, which is the craziest book I've ever read. Like, like I hadn't read something that had really like made me feel fucked up in a long time, and then I read that, and I was like, Jesus Christ!
It's at the top.
Yeah, it all takes place in this chat room where gay men are talking about this sex worker that some of them think that they've had encounters with, but they're like, did he have blonde hair? Did he have like, blue eyes? Like they're like trying to like, it's like, oh, mine had a piercing. Oh, mine didn't, but they're like all like talking about these sexual experiences they've had with him. And then it just gets fucking weird for me. Like it just goes to this crazy place. So yeah, check out that book too. Anyways, I'll shut up.
Dude, you're so good.
I work at a record store and a bookstore, so I could talk about that stuff for a long time, but I'll stop.
That's fucking awesome. This next one is something that I find that I always get a message with after that says, hey, can you include these ones too, please? Name an independent artist or collective from your circle that you would want to put the FTI community onto after this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll shout out Amelia Maxwell, who's playing our release show. She's just put out a new EP called Lapdog, which I think is super sick. I think like one of the best songwriters going right now. I'll shout out the Flamingos Pink, who are our friends that we're touring with from Montreal. Just if you like just like garage rock, like punk, like kind of White Stripes, type stuff, like they're your band. Check them out. And just like really good dudes, like, super passionate and like nice, cool dudes. And yeah, also Jay Feelbender, who's our friend Jacob's band. Jacob was in Goodbye Honolulu. So he was one of the guys that I was talking about earlier, but he's still making music. And Duncan, who's our drummer, plays lead guitar in Jacob's band. And yeah, Jacob's been making music for ever. He had a band called Headspace for a really long time that kind of has morphed into this newer project that he's doing. But yeah, he's just like he's like the Alex G of Toronto. I feel like he was like a Bandcamp guy, like just dropping like albums and albums and albums of songs. And, he was an inspiration to me when I was younger. It's just like a example of someone that was just writing a lot and like really like, just pumping out songs. And yeah, he recently got signed to Victory Pool Records and seems to be doing well for himself. I actually bumped into him on my way to have this conversation with you. He was like walking down the street in my neighborhood, so it was nice to see him. So yeah, I'll give those three a shout out.
That was the most confident approach to that question yet. You have set the standard because, man, I'm telling you, just the way that you're able to just talk so happily and passionate about your friends who are also artists is so fucking awesome. I'm checking these people out, and I do encourage the FTI community to also check it out. And now the hardest question for you, but you're going to ace this one. Putting the bow on top, the cherry on top, plug yourself, plug BBQ Pope. Tell us what's going on in your world and where people can find you.
Yeah. BBQ Pope, as we've been talking about, we've got our new record Unfurl coming out on October 24th. It'll be available, wherever you get music. It'll also be available on our Bandcamp if you want to support us more directly, as well as on vinyl. We'll have our vinyl for sale at all of our upcoming dates. We're doing the tour out to the East Coast late October. We'll be hitting Ottawa, Montreal, Moncton, Halifax, Cape Breton, Charlottetown, Bathurst, New Brunswick, St. John, Edmundston, and then we'll be playing Toronto for our hometown release show. So we'd love to see you at any of those shows if you're in any of those cities. We've also got other dates in other parts of Ontario after that we'll be announcing in the near future. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can hit us up at BBQPope_Pope on Instagram. Our email is listed there too. If you're a promoter or a band that would like to play with us, say what's up. All of our singles are currently streaming off the record, like we've been talking about. So if you want to get a taste for the record, you can check those out. We've made music videos for all 3 singles that are on our YouTube. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to chat and this has been fun.
I've enjoyed absolutely every second of this, and as I've told previous guests too, where there's like that timeline where we try to make it happen and then like it doesn't happen at the beginning and then it happens and now it just feels like it happened all so fast. This is one of those conversations that I've not only learned so much about BBQ Pope, but just the friends, the musicians that you were very excited to talk about. I'm now going to go tune in, see what's going on in their world. FTI community, I do encourage, especially if you were at Creators Connect this past Thursday, BBQ Pope is a band that you do want to reach out to be on a bill, to listen to their music. So take Reid's advice, hit them up on Instagram, their email, and their YouTube as well. I've been Matt Ryder for the In Your Studio podcast, joined by Reid from BBQ Pope. I hope everybody has a fantastic night. We'll see you soon.